Hi, loves. So today's video is called A Million and One Orgasms, and I am amused by that. It's probably obvious to you that it's not about, especially if you know my work, this is not about that exactly. What I wanted to speak to is, however, this yearning inside of most women to almost no matter where they are in their pleasure body, to go deeper, to have more, to experience more. And I think that is often across the board. And I think that it not, for those of us who feel more dormant sexually, even to those of us who feel very activated sexually. And I think, first of all, the reason for that is that female sexuality has a way of unfolding forever. There is no end. So when you really start to tap into the potential of your pleasure body, of what the deep feminine sexual current is, how she moves, you start to realize that um, it's endless and there's always a new terrain. Whether it's actually in your physical pleasure, whether it's in how deeply you're letting your partner inside of you, whether it's in how much you're holding it yourself, how much you're letting your pleasure open and fill your heart. I mean, there is endless, and I mean it, endless possibility for how the female current, the deep feminine current, can move in our bodies. And for a lot of us, there is that sense of there's always a little bit of yearning for more, yearning to take it further. And so I wanted to speak a little bit to that yearning and to a couple of things to consider around that. Um, First of all, I'll just say out loud that this is not a video about sexual techniques or even orgasmic techniques necessarily, but I do want to say and just put it in the field that we, as much as sexuality has been put into a box, female sexuality, so has the female orgasm, especially in the more mainstream culture. So there are multiple kinds of female orgasm: clitoral, G-spot, cervical, physically. There are also many, many dimensions of female orgasm subtly and energetically in the fullness of your body. So I would just encourage you, as you're exploring the edges of your pleasure and you're exploring what it is to open more and more to your body, that you see orgasm, see pleasure, see the capacity of your pleasure body as a current that never ends, an ebb and a flow that you can ride, that you explore what it is to keep opening and softening around your pleasure rather than gripping around it, rather than aiming for real intensity, and to actually start to breathe and open around the intensity that you feel, bringing it, asking it to come more into your body, to fill you, to nourish you. So orgasmic potential, there's a lot of skill out there, there's a lot of technique, there's a lot to do that's valuable, that will teach you and help you come more and more into your body and how you find your own pleasure. But be careful with all of that, because it can easily become just another way to make yourself into a trophy, or to make your sexuality into something to be used and controlled rather than a current to be ridden, something to surrender to. So as you're exploring your orgasmic potential, your pleasure potential, wherever you are on that spectrum, consider softening and dilating around it, and softening even in your yoni, softening even to just receive more and more. There's a way that, when there's clitoral G-spot and then cervical orgasms, each moving deeper into the body. And for me, it goes all the way up into the heart at times. And I know that it goes further too, right? So there's a way that I believe that a lot of what we're often desiring, more than a million orgasms, is the depth and the continuity and the surrender that can happen when we give way and keep giving way and keep opening to the receptivity and the full, the giving way, right? So I would just invite that on one level as you're exploring your pleasure potential. And then I wanted to speak to a couple of other things. um, that in that, so as you're surrendering and knowing that there is no end, there will be this natural ebb and flow of reaching thresholds inside of your body and being where it's almost like it is like a threshold. You'll meet places inside of yourself where all of a sudden you're not giving way. And it'll be a holding. You can feel it. I've just been going through this myself where I have a ton of transition happening in my life. My son's leaving for college, and I can feel how much emotion is inside of me. I can feel the transition working me. And what I've been noticing sexually is that I'm not giving way. There's a holding in my body. There's a way that my whole being is in a deep work around this piece of transitioning with my son. If I didn't know better, I could pathologize that, right? I could think, oh shit, I'm shut down. I'm not, something's up between me and my partner. I could project it in a bunch of ways. But what I know is that female sexuality and the capacity to open is extremely tied to our emotional state and other things that we're holding in our being, because our sexual energy is part of what helps us create, endure, transform other things that are going on in our lives. And it doesn't always look explicitly sexual. So in my case, right now, there's a dormancy in me, and there's a wise kind of holding of what's happening inside of me. It's not a time to be like blasting open. It's not a time where my being wants to give way in quite the same way to quite the same thing. So I'm at a threshold where what I'm choosing to do based on what I've learned, and what I would invite you to do when you find a threshold or a place of holding, is just let it be. Notice it. Don't shut down entirely to pleasure or shut down to connection, but just let it be what it is. There's a way in which, for me, it has been important to let my sexuality, let my body show me what's going on inside of me, right? It's been part of showing me how much I'm holding, how much transformation I'm in, and how much care that actually needs. That has been shown to me also by the way that my body is sexually responding. So our bodies are wise in that way. Our sexuality is very wise in that way. And what I noticed was, for me, there was this feeling of like I was just with it, but it was like, oh God, I feel just so a little stuck or pent up or held or something. It was just, there's so much happening. And when there came a breaking point, and I had a big emotional, I finally sobbed about my son leaving, and I finally got to the heart of what I was feeling. And it was a lot. And right afterward, my libido kicked back up. I could feel it. I could feel my desire, my openness soften again. And I've heard it many times from other women how they will have a really big emotional release, a really big breakthrough in trust with their partner, or something like that. And all of a sudden, bam, their sexuality opens to either as it was, as they've known it, or deeper, usually deeper places inside of them, their heart, their yoni. The orgasmic potential opens. And that is in direct response to what else you're holding in your life and what is going on between you and your partner and the level of trust that you're creating. It's important, I think, to recognize that so we know what we're riding as we're riding our sexual current, and what is possibly all informing and shaping our orgasmic capacity, our ability, or even our desire to surrender into big amounts of pleasure or a big giving way. So just to note that, and to treasure it rather than think of it as a problem, right? So to come to a listening of what your body is trying to tell you at all times, and to know that your tending of all of your life, of your heart, of your stress, of your relationships, of the things that you love, is going to be reflected in your sexuality and in your potential, in the openness and the pleasure potential inside of you. Um, oh, and what I was wanting to, I did a video once called how it's important to be sex rather than to do sex, and this is right along with that. I mean, I'm sure quite a few of you can just, some of you can have orgasms at will. Like, you know what to do. You know how to get yourself there, right? And that's fine. That's great. It's wonderful to learn our bodies. But when you want to really ride the deep feminine current inside of you, then you have to let go of the like things that you do to get yourself there. There's a way of coming even more deeply into your body to be with what you're feeling, to feel it and be it rather than do it, so that you're not overriding things like your thresholds, right? So it's often possible to, at my threshold recently, I could have probably, not at this point probably, but there could have been a way of going into sexuality as I knew it, what works, just kind of going into a way of doing it rather than really just being with what I was feeling. And it wasn't entirely comfortable, but it was also true. And so I want to invite you to also prioritize that as you're more and more wanting to surrender to what's authentic and true in you, to just watch that. You can, because the other thing that happens when you stop kind of lapsing into what you think should be happening or what you want to have happening or the portrait you want to present, is that you will actually find your thresholds. And when you find your thresholds and when you wait there, then and only then will you be granted entry past them. So you can bypass thresholds, you can bypass holdings sometimes, but you'll stay in the same terrain that you've been in or that's just familiar to you. If you wait at your thresholds, that's where your deeper openings will be, even though at first they may feel like a closing down or a dormancy or a holding, right? And then the final piece I wanted to say related to the fact that, if you want to have 1,000,001 orgasms, which I was telling my partner about this video, and so he did the math. He's like, well, you'd have to be immortal if you had one every day. or you'd have to be 100 years worth of orgasmic woman with 27 a day. So don't try it. Don't do it. That's not the idea. In fact, that's kind of the point, is that when it becomes the idea that you have, and that anything becomes the idea, then you actually step off the current of pleasure and prohibit yourself from being able to go deeper into the fullness of your pleasure, the fullness of your orgasmic capacity in all of its expressions, right? From the gentle to the intense, up through your heart, everywhere, right? But what I wanted to say is that there's also, because our yonis, because our capacity to surrender is very impacted by um, our emotional state, what we're holding, this piece around clearing past lovers especially becomes really important, because you can kind of think your way through relationships. You can think your way and understand your way through the lessons and all these things. But if you don't tend to what your body remembers, even in terms of like, if you've been with someone for a long time, your body will remember them. Like, there's a way that our bodies will shape to a lover that we've really loved and that we've been intimate with for a long time. There is a way of needing to meet and to clear from our systems and from our bodies both the physical um, impressions and all the emotional holdings. They will show up in the yoni. This is not something I'm it's probably not new information to a lot of you. There's, this is deep tantra. There's no I don't know that it's held very much in the consciousness at large, but it's not a secret that the female sexual capacity is very much, and the orgasmic potential is very much tied to what we're holding or what we're not. So yeah, so to tend to clearing past lovers, to tend to your heart, will also open up your pleasure and your ability to experience deeper levels of pleasure and surrender. Like, it's a full body tending, because what you're going for is orgasmic potential that expresses through your entire body, that nourishes your entire being, that supports and enlivens everything in your world, right? We're taking it out of the box and we're letting it be the current that rides, the deep feminine current that rides through our entire life and everything that we express, everything that we do. And it asks for a little bit of devotional discipline in terms of really listening, really waiting at our thresholds, clearing what there is to clear, or letting it clear when it's ready. So that is my Million and One Orgasms video. I just wanted to encourage you to continue trusting the way that your body will open, trusting your thresholds, and being cautious of in any way putting your sexuality on some kind of agenda, even if it's the agenda to experience extreme pleasure, because it's counterproductive. That it's opening, it's softening, it's receiving, it's letting sensation happen, slowing down enough to feel what you feel, everything from sensations and pleasure to pain to emotions that come. I'm sure many of you have had the experience of, being in a lovemaking situation and having tears come. There is such a gorgeous connection between the womb and the heart, and so much for us if we're willing to be full spectrum women, to be in residency and sacred tending of our own sexuality, and to deeply listen rather than to ask anything of it, right? Come to your sexuality, your orgasmic potential, the endless potential of your pleasure that will continually bring you into more and more yearning, a sense that you're always just beginning in certain ways, that there's always more, there's always something amazing around the corner. Come to that as a place of richness and bounty, that is your natural state. And let it take you, is my invitation. So happy to share some time with you about that. It was on my mind. It's been on my mind, partly because there's some amazing stuff out there in terms of re-educating the way, there are some amazing jade egg teachers, for instance, that are working to really help women sensitize and strengthen and really open physical orgasmic capacity and health, right? And then there are others who are making it into still another, taking it out of the realm of deep healing and surrendering into oneself, into more of like, can you hold up an elephant with your yoni? Can you pull the Empire States Building? Can you whatever? It's not about that, right? It's never about that. And someone who loves you and who belongs inside of you will want to meet your pleasure wherever it is and track your body and go on the journey with you, no matter where you're starting, and in excitement for wherever you're going. So I will close with that. My book is still in pre-launch phase. It's all about clearing past lovers. It does relate to this topic because a lot of what will free up your orgasmic capacity and your sexual capacity is indirect. It won't be directly related to your sexuality. It'll be things like clearing and sorting out past lovers that are still, past relationships that have had great impacts on you, right? That it'll be indirect, how you sit with yourself, how you respect and know your own deep feminine current, however she shows up, all these things. So the link is below for the book. You still have a month to get the free course, Sacred Needs and Your Sexual Archetype, if you pre-order it. And yeah, I think that's it. Pleasure heals. Following our pleasure is one of the reclamations of deep feminine thriving, is to be able to follow pleasure, to be able to track her ebbs and flows, but follow her and let her lead us through even some of the darker times. Even, yeah, and in order to do that, we need to understand the full range of pleasure. We need to understand that orgasm doesn't always look like, a multiply orgasmic, ecstatic sexual experience. Sometimes it looks like your heart just softly pulsing open. Sometimes it looks like your whole being softening into your partner, maybe for the first time completely. And just in that, everything just subtly opening. The orgasmic energy is an energy of opening. It's an energy of giving way. And it has every timbre, every nuance that the deep feminine current can provide. So enjoy exploring the rightness of what you are, and enjoy the book if you get it. And I will talk to you soon. Much love.